It's nice out. We should take this outside today.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Gottschall. I am the Lower Paxton Township Manager, and in typical fashion, I'm going to give a brief summary of a very brief agenda for tonight, particularly for the benefit of those who may be watching at home. For this evening's meeting, we have two items on the agenda, which are as follows. An introduction of the Lower Paxton Township Police Department's mental health co-responder to the board officially and to the public. And also action on a proposal for the American Recovery Program accounting and advising services from Zelenkowski Axelrod, and we have a presenter here on that as well this evening. And with all that said, the members of the board are seated and prepared to conduct business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gottschall. We'll call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. I would like to ask everyone to please stand, and Supervisor Zumas will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to announce that the Board of Supervisors did meet in executive session prior to this meeting and will be doing so again following the meeting to discuss primarily human resources and personnel issues this evening. With that, the time is now for public comment, and public comment is for any item not on the agenda this evening. If you wish to speak to an agenda item, you'll have an opportunity to do that when we discuss that item. So would anybody like to address the board on an item not on the agenda this evening? Anybody like to address the board on an item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we
had a half a person.
We had what?
A half.
Oh, okay, I didn't see you, sorry. Please give us your name and address.
Hi there, Ashley Pollard, 4925 Colorado Avenue, Harrisburg. I think last time we were here, we were going to hear the results of the voting for the chicken and the bees.
No, no voting. The process was that we were to each provide the township manager with feedback as to what we each individually thought about the issue. In order to vote, we'd have to have an ordinance in front of us, which we do not have yet. And Mr. Gottschall is prepared to discuss the results of his individual conversations and where we go to next.
Okay.
So yes, we are going to have an update on that issue this evening.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you so much.
Yep, thank you. Yes, we are prepared for that. So actually, we don't have time for Mr. Gottschall's report. Why don't we just do that right now? This is normally when you want to give us an update on the birds and bees?
I could try that. I'm not, okay, I'll just get into it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you off guard here. We're actually, for those watching at home, we're talking about ordinances regarding the keeping of chickens and also the keeping of beehives, just to be clear what we're talking about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Yes, so I have at this point received feedback from the board, which really points to some similarities, but yet also some divergence of opinion on the issue, obviously, of birds and, I'm sorry, of bees and hens. So some similarities, including quality of life issues, such as aesthetics, noise, and smell, things of that nature. Some neighborhood health impacts, such as the number of animals or hives being kept, things like that. And also a desire to support private property rights of the board. Some divergence on opinion on how exactly to safely, efficiently, and effectively implement regulations that bolster these private property rights. So that's kind of the overall opinion of the board members individually that I have collected. So, with that being said, board members, I would suggest at this time that if it is the desire of the board, that I continue to work with staff to bring forward a draft ordinance for the board's consideration, which may be inclusive of, some of the similar opinions of the board members individually.
And once we have a draft ordinance, then we can publicly have a discussion about it with all of us talking to each other at a public meeting. So unless there's objection, I think we should so direct the staff to proceed with doing a draft ordinance from which we can then have a workshop and discuss the particulars. Any objection to moving forward with the drafting of a proposed ordinance? Okay. And of course, once we have the proposed ordinance and we discuss it, each of the particulars can be discussed item by item at that point. So we need a document to be working off of. Okay. Does that answer your question that we're going to move the process forward? Okay. All right. With that, we do have with us Director Koshiba, who is going to make an introduction to the board of a very important addition to our police department.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. It's with great enthusiasm that I come here, and she's been working for quite some time with us, but it's with great enthusiasm that I talk about our new co-responder that's assigned to the police department. But first, I have to take you back just a little bit, and I'll let Ashley Inger from the District Attorney's Office give you a little more background on the program. However, this all began in May of 2019, and it started with a full-time co-responder in the city of Harrisburg and a floating co-responder that we shared with 2 other municipalities.
Director, before you go any further, could you explain what a co-responder is?
I'll leave that with Ashley to
just
to
so people
explain.
know what we're talking
So
about.
I'll let that with Ashley.
Okay.
She's going to explain it the best. But this program, as I said, started in 2019, and as we saw success with the program, not just in the city of Harrisburg, but within our part-time responder here in Lower Paxton, it became important that we continue the program. So as many of you on the board remember, in the 2021 budget preparation, I came to you kind of at the last couple meetings and asked for funding for this very important position. And we know nationally the issues that we're having, and this co-responder position with Alexa here is valuable in the fact that she's able to kind of de-escalate some of these situations, and her overall demeanor and just non-uniform appearance has helped us with that. So looking at the position, I asked for funding through township funds to support the position, not in full, because Ashley will explain that here in a moment, but that funding, part of that funding comes from Dauphin County. Some of the training and other things comes from the district attorney's office. So I brought that forward to the board, and I have to say that Mr. Navarro and Mr. Zumas, you kind of lit up when I talked about this, and you were 100% behind it, as was the other board members, and I appreciate your leadership and support in making this happen from everyone on the board. So moving fast forward, we were able to get the funding through our supplement funding through the township tax dollars to bring Alexa Lawrence on board. With that, I was going to get into a little bit of the background about the co-responder, what the co-responder is, but fortunately, we have Miss Ashley Yinger here from the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office as a program coordinator and many other hats that she wears. She can give you a background on the co-responder program, how it's working, and then I'll let her introduce one of her fine employees, our fine employee, Alexa, downstairs, and you can hear just briefly from her. But again, I can't underscore the importance of having a position like this in our township. When I ask for that funding, 400 to 500 calls a year that we respond, mental health calls, that she's going to be able to help us out with and hopefully de-escalate and help these individuals get the help that they need and the support that they need with their families. So without further ado, Ms. Ashley Yinger.
Thank you, Director. Board, so my name is Ashley Yinger. I work with the Dauphin County District Attorney's Office. As Director Kashiba said, I wear many hats, but my title is a program administrator. And a lot of my work focuses in on the front end, behavioral health initiatives, so diversionary initiatives that we can focus in on. And of course, I do a lot of work from the back end too if individuals are at Dauphin County Prison and we're working on reentry. But tonight I bring, a lot of this initiative came from Dauphin County's Stepping Up initiative. And Stepping Up is a national initiative to reduce serious mental illness in the jails and prisons. In 2016, Dauphin County worked with the Council of State Government to do technical assistance, and what they did was they came in and looked at things with Dauphin County, particularly, individuals that were in Dauphin County Prison with a serious mental illness, their length of stay, and through that, they were able to come out with findings that were showing that the rate of individuals with a serious mental illness in jail was a lot higher than those that did not, and they were actually looking at that population and saw that a lot of them were nonviolent offenders, just resources being able to be in the hands of the police departments, county mental health, and one of the recommendations was a co-responder. And through that, there was probably about 10 different recommendations, and Dauphin County has been able to do a couple of them. So I came in Dauphin County in 2018, and a lot of my focus is looking at those recommendations, served as like a consultant basically with the district attorney's office and the mental health liaison, and was able to implement majority of those recommendations. And one of them really started off with the crisis intervention team training, the CIT training. It's a 40-hour basic training model geared towards law enforcement, also includes correctional officers, probation officers, and mental health professionals are also able to join in. And we go through a whole 40-hour week that talks about human services, training on mental health, the symptoms, being able to recognize them, different diagnoses, substance use disorders, and then homelessness, you name it, autism, developmental disabilities, a lot of pretty much the whole human services system. And then the back end of it, later in the week, we get into de-escalation, and it really focuses in on active listening and being able to have communication with someone that's in crisis to be able to de-escalate them, because the goal is to link them to treatment if we can avoid incarceration whenever it's appropriate, by all means. And so we've really been able to train. So unfortunately, I did have to cancel a couple trainings because of COVID. Our next one's actually coming up the first week of May. Director Director Koshiba has sent officers through Lower Paxton in that training. Overall, though, with Dauphin County, I have 121 trained as of right now, and we only continue to do that. That was really the first step, was being able to give the tools to the officers. I always tell them day one, I'm not expecting you to leave this 40-hour training with all 40 hours. I hope that you leave it with another tool in your toolbox. And from there, then, we were able to implement the co-responders. So a co-responder is basically, the goal is it's a mental health professional embedded with the police department. The term co-responder is where they co with the officers and can do those ride-alongs. The focus is absolutely mental health, but I like to kind of word it as it's a behavioral health, anybody that's having a behavioral health crisis. And sometimes what you find is someone that may have a serious mental illness, they might also have some other things going on. It may be housing, it may be employment, relationships. And if we don't help them in those areas, we're not going to also be able to help them with their mental health. So the co-responders, although they do focus on that de-escalation and that mental health crisis, they're also there to provide a support if the person needs food, if the person needs housing, if they need treatment for mental health, but also maybe substance use. You name it, they can be a support there, because the goal is, to reduce the time that officers need to spend on those calls once we know that there's no safety at risk, there's no charges, no arrests needing to be made, and it allows them to return to other calls that they may be able to do, and where Alexa can actually spend time, build a rapport with the person, because sometimes it might take 15 visits to that person's house to build a rapport with them, to trust them. And as Director Koshiba said, that they're part of the police department, but at the end of the day, they're not an officer, and hopefully being able to be in plain clothes, that individuals can help being able to work with them, that they know they're not a police officer, and be able to work with the officers and the co-responders, because then ultimately what we want to do is reduce that contact with law enforcement then in general. We, as Director said, we started this in May of 2020. I oversee the program. We have we employ them with the district attorney's office so that I could supervise them, just as my role with stepping up. Other states and counties do it in different ways. This has worked out well with us, and what we've been able to do is build relationships with the police departments and share that. So as Director Koshiba says, we fund it through the district attorney's office and Dauphin County as a whole as well, with the commissioner's support. And so I have 7 co-responders, and Alexa Lawrence is the co-responder that is full-time embedded here with Lower Paxton. So what I figured I would do is I would let her come up, and as I kind of gave a background to it, let her kind of share maybe what a day or so. Every day can be different, but she can give some examples of things that she's been able to help with since we've started this program.
Wonderful.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alexa Lawrence, as you all know at this point. First of all, thank you for the funding for this position. It's amazing for me. So a day-to-day life as a co-responder, I essentially start my day and I immediately am embedded in the police department. I call in and I'm chosen to ride with an officer of their choice, constantly rotating, so I'm not with the same person all the time. And every mental health call I will respond to, whether it is in their district or not. So whether that's someone that's experiencing suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, or like Ashley said, any developmental disabilities, I can go and assist them with that. So what that looks like, if someone is currently experiencing suicidal or homicidal ideation, I can assist talking them down, de-escalating the situation, contact crisis intervention, the other agency within Dauphin County, and make it a little bit more of a smooth transition for them to go into the hospital and help them understand what the process is. And then from there, help them obtain inpatient treatment or outpatient treatment, depending on what their needs are. In addition to that, like Ashley said, I do help with people who are affected by substance abuse, homelessness, and a variety of other behavioral issues. I frequently receive phone calls from other clients. I essentially act as a very intermittent case manager. The turnaround time is preferred to be around 30 days, but it's really a case-by-case basis. Some people I've had since day one, and I continue to talk with them 6 months later. It just really depends on their needs. I can just be an ear to listen to for someone to vent if they're just going to have chronic mental health problems. I can be that person to refer them to a treatment facility for opiate addiction, help with relationship issues, really just kind of an all-in-all built-in counselor to the police department. I've been able to help a lot of officers de-escalate situations that otherwise might not have been so easy to de-escalate just because of their presence itself. So I think I'm kind of like a warm person in that regard. People are easy to talk to me, so it works out very well. So that's pretty much what I do on a day-to-day. It's a little chaotic, and you never know what you're going to get depending on the call volume, but it's exciting, and I love it, and I'm very thankful that you all chose for this position to be a part of the township, so thank you.
Thanks. So
I had a
Director, if we
question,
need her after a board meeting, do we have to go through you, or can we call her directly?
Alexa, I had a quick question. Alexa. Did you say you ride every day?
Monday through Friday, yes.
Monday through Friday.
Yep, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 is my typical schedule. Today, for example, I was held over till 6:20. I was dealing with a 302, if you're familiar. It's an involuntary commitment. So I was held over for that.
Okay.
It just
Well,
kind of depends.
And that was my question was, are there a lot of calls
Yes.
between 9 to 5 that require your services?
Yeah, there are a pretty decent amount of calls between 9 to 5. There's the outliers as well. So in the mornings when I come into the department, I usually spend about an hour and a half just going through their records management system. I'll look through all the calls that they had either over the night or on Monday from the past weekend, and see which one of those calls are either categorized as mental health or aren't categorized as mental health, but clearly there's an underlier there, or they're a frequent caller, so it has a little bit more of a red flag.
And obviously, there's got to be some protocols to ensure your protection.
Yes, yep, I do wear bulletproof vests, so I look very official. And I carry pepper spray, Narcan, all that good stuff, so.
And there's kind of a semi-clear protocol as far as what responses you get involved in and watch, because you must be in the car at some point where there are things that you don't really, it doesn't require you to be.
Right, exactly. So traffic stops, for example, I'm not gonna get out of the car. There's really no benefit for me. Now, if they pulled somebody over and clearly it was a mental health issue, then maybe I would step out of the car at that point. Otherwise, you're right, there's no need for me on those sorts of
You're going to end up
calls.
seeing a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I see it all.
Yes.
Or if it's like a active shooter, or we know the person carries firearms, they're not gonna put me into that situation until it's deemed safe for me to follow in.
And as far as 9 to 5, is that, how did we arrive at that? Is that, I mean, as far as, I can imagine certain kinds of calls may be more likely to occur later in the evening.
I believe you're right, but that would more so be a question for Ashley and Koshiba, because I believe, yeah.
The reason why we went with 9 to 5, interesting enough, I was part of this in another county too, and it was initially on, the departments were like, we want a 2 to 10. We believe that that's gonna be more of the time. So we started that. We started 2 to 10. And what we were finding is, Alexa said it perfectly, it's like an interim case manager to really kind of get them where they need to be. And sometimes she might have people that she needs to continuously follow up on. Some she may be able to follow up on, they're doing good, they've had no other contact with the police, and we can kind of consider them closed because we set them up with where they need to be. When we're connecting those services, a lot of those services outside of crisis intervention, they're happening between 9 to 5. And so that's why we found the benefit to have, if their goal is really to engage them into treatment rather than incarceration, we need those hours of 9 to 5 to be able to link them up to their services. But you are right, that doesn't mean that calls don't come in past 5. So what we do is they're essentially almost on call 24/7 because the officers have, Alexa has a work cell phone, and they can call her past 5 if they really deem appropriate that they need her assistance. But oftentimes what we find is, especially with officers that went through the CIT training and just even their years in the field, that they may be able to resolve it quote unquote then and there, but if they know, hey, if we don't intervene here soon and get this person some services, we're gonna go out there again tomorrow night. So that's where we say that the officers will submit like a referral, which is an email, phone call, to Alexa and say, hey, we went out to so-and-so's house last night, this is what happened, but at the same time, we believe something else is going on, and if we don't get that person into treatment, we might see him again tonight or tomorrow night, and that's where Alexa can follow up with him then. So there's definitely outside work past 9 to 5, but we just find that during those times, it's the most beneficial to connect to services.
Thanks for everything you've done to help us with this, and our public safety director and Alexa. I feel strongly, and I always tell people, we can't expect too much from our police department. There's only so much they can do. But this is something that I think will help and that we can do. And I appreciate everybody making this happen.
Yes, and I appreciate you guys, voting for this and helping out the police department. And I can't thank enough to Director Koshiba and the officers, because the program definitely works with the officers' buy-in. Being able to support having a co-responder in their car all day long. And so kudos to the officers, because they have really bought into it and they're utilizing her. Alexa, she's very busy. So I think it's a very good team approach, and just from the community standpoint as well.
Ashley, you said that, she could be on call 24/7. If something really happens over the weekend, would she come in? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, I want to thank you both also. I'm a nurse practitioner and I'm on Dauphin County's mental health board, and I've never met you guys, but I've raved about you for the last several months. So thank you so much for everything. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to all of you for, I think that events that have occurred over the past year or so have pointed to the value of having a co-responder available to us and the services from the county at all times. So it's good to learn lessons from others, and hopefully we can prevent such circumstances from happening here because of your service. So thank you. Anything else, Director, or have you covered the subject?
I think we're handling it pretty well, so thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it appropriate or not to get a photo or to let
Let's
people
finish.
know what's happening?
Let's finish the meeting.
Well, but before they leave, then we should tell them.
Well,
If I may, the next
it's
presenter does have another obligation this evening, so if we could just.
shouldn't take us long, hopefully, to finish the meeting. Speaking of the next presenter, Mr. Gottschall, this is action needed on a proposal for ARP Accounting and Advisory Services from Zelenkowski Axelrod LLC. This essentially being consulting services to help us navigate through the funds from the recently passed COVID Stimulus Act, or however you wish to describe it. I know it has an official name, American Recovery Act or something like that. But we will be receiving some significant funding from that, funding that we still do not know what we can spend on, which is why we need a consultant, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, members of the board, yes. And Mr. Taylor is here as well this evening from ZA to provide follow-up if there are any questions from the board as it relates to particularly reading the agreement a little further and our conversation from last week. He can provide answers to those.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody
Any
doing?
questions from?
Yeah,
Board?
I have a couple questions. Do you have you don't have the agreement?
I do have
Okay.
my desk.
So on the first page, the third paragraph, it says, "We will notify you immediately of any circumstances we encounter that could significantly affect the initial fee estimate." And when I asked you last week how much it cost, you told me $55,000.
Yes.
And now this is in here, and I don't like the word significantly affect. So, I mean, what are you looking at? Are you looking at double? Are you looking at another $20,000? I mean, our audit for the township only cost $35,000, and here we are at $55,000. And when I read this agreement, you're saying it could even cost more.
Good question. So the $55,000 is a not to exceed fee, so everybody understands that. the reason that language is in there, we used a cookie cutter contract, if you want to call it that, for all the municipalities. We were with a lot of them. So if, take for instance, the city of Sharon's getting 15 million. And if they wanted to run 10 different programs to households that I'm reviewing thousands of applications, we had to have that language in there. I don't anticipate you running any of those programs. I'm happy to take it out.
Okay, well, I'm just a little concerned because you did say 55, and then as I read the contract,
Yes.
and it could cost us more money. So then on page 2, paragraph 3, it says, to effect mediation, the party desiring mediation shall five the other party 10 days in advance. What does that mean, shall five?
Sounds like a typo by accident.
Yeah, which isn't good, which is not good. And then I just had, you had mentioned last week that we would be the last one that you would be taking because you're so busy. And I'm a little concerned that we might not get the undivided attention that we're going to need because you told us last week that you are very busy with this and this would be our last, would be our last one. So I'm just concerned about that. And to my fellow board members, I really think that our staff and the professionals that we use, Steve, I personally think that we could handle this ourselves instead of spending the $55,000.
Any other board members have questions or comments?
Well, once again, I had asked you this last week. The 55,000 doesn't come out of our general fund.
Correct.
Okay, that comes out of it's
These
coming
grant funds, that's
out
correct.
of the grant fund. So you won't even get paid until we know that we're getting that money.
Correct. I'll give you some perspective for whatever it's worth. I work with a lot of counties, and a lot of counties have large fiscal offices and controllers' offices. Some did attempt to do this on their own. They struggled through it. Some realized the value of every government at every level, particularly at the municipal level, runs lean. There's not a lot of extra staff. And what comes, the compliance requirements and regulations that come through this are very particular. And one of the things we talked about was all the other funding streams that are going to be coming through this. It takes a team of people nonstop to stay on top of that. And I think, when counties looked at it last year, this conversation came up quite often. They realized they couldn't hire somebody because they'd be paying somebody six figures to try to do it. It's somebody with a high level of expertise. Their staff couldn't handle it all internally. So that's just some perspective.
Okay, but you made the comment last week that you guys are going to be very, very busy. And how much time are we going to get from you if you have all these other clients?
You're going to get all the time you need.
Okay.
I think it's important to understand this is not an auditing contract. This is a consulting contract.
I know the consulting is $55,000.
Right.
And, like I'm saying, the audit, we're only paying $35, and here we are $55 plus. We could end up, I know you're saying not, but we could end up spending more.
You're comparing apples and oranges. Since this is not we're not comparing an auditing contract to an auditing contract. This is a consulting contract. And what I keep hearing from the township manager and staff is that they're already stretched to the breaking point, and every department wants more staff. So now we're going to throw something like this on top of them. Whereas I think they have the professional ability to do this, given the amount of money and the complexity of the rules and regulations that are going to be handed down by the federal government, I just don't see them as having the time to effectively do this. And if we can share the cost of working our way through this with other counties and municipalities, it seems to me to be a great joint effort. Not to mention the fact that we want to make sure we do things right, so when we do get to audit, we don't have funds that are spent in the wrong way that we have to repay or otherwise explain why we didn't do it properly. So personally, I think it's a great investment to making sure that we are properly advised as to how these funds can be spent, and also to not duplicate what the county and the state might offer us.
And I would say, if this was the new normal, and we were going to have to go through this maybe every year where there's a pandemic or some kind of disaster where there are unprecedented amounts of federal dollars coming down with new strings attached every year, I would say absolutely we have got to hire, train, and get the staff in place to do that in-house every year. If this was going to be the way it was going to be going forward. God help us, if that ever was the case, this would be the least of our problems, trying to get the money right. But assuming that is not the case, that this is a one-time, maybe there'll be some bleed into another fiscal year, and that this is not coming out of taxpayers' pockets, and that if we do it wrong, we might have to give back money, or we didn't take advantage of all the money that was there, which is taxpayer dollars that they've already spent, or we didn't fully utilize it. I think that would be something that we would regret. But I wouldn't do this every year. I would not be paying consultants every year for this. But for a one-time, or God help us, if it bleeds into another year, to get it right, and knowing that we're not taking out of our taxpayer general fund, I think this is something worth supporting.
We have, 2 to 3 years to expend the revenue from this
Till the end of 2024.
to the end of 2024.
That's true.
So we'll get, half of the money is going to be dispersed in June, and then the other half at some point next year.
Yes.
So we want to be in a position later this summer to begin hopefully utilizing those funds in an effective way to backfill some of the revenue losses and expenses we've had from the COVID pandemic. And I would concur with Chris. Hopefully we never have to go through anything like this again.
Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you be able to help us with this?
I'll answer that with a little story of my own. Are you familiar at all with the PPP loan program that was established? So when I looked at that, and I did apply for one, the rules, they started out at one point, and then they changed numerous times while this money was being allocated in accordance with a program, and the rules were not easy to understand by any stretch of the imagination. I still don't know if I understand all of them. Somehow I was able to get the application filed and get it approved, and I'm still waiting to hear from the SBA whether I'm going to qualify for it to be forgiven. But those rules, and that wasn't a gigantic program. I mean, it was geared toward mostly small businesses, but the rules were not crystal clear to me. In fact, I had to go to other people to help me understand what they were trying to say. So I really, and this program is going to be heads and shoulders above that in degree of difficulty. So nothing against the staff or anybody like that, but I don't think the staff and me handling it would work out very well. It's just it's too complex of a program to administer. So.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Gottschall's very good at combing through these things, but there also are only so many hours in a work week on top of it all. So. And we have numerous of other initiatives that the board is prepared to enter into here over the next few months as well. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have before us a proposal for advising services from Zelenkowski Axelrod, LLC. Would anybody care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to accept proposal for ARP, Accounting and Advising Services from Zelenkowski Axelrod, LLC.
In the amount of $55,000?
In amount of, yes, $55,000.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any additional discussion or public comment? Hearing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Lindsay?
No.
Mr. Zumas?
Aye.
Mr. Judd?
Aye.
Mr. Navarro?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm sure we'll be in touch. One other item of business that is actually not on the agenda, but sort of left over from last week. We had a motion relative to a settlement agreement, I guess you would call it, with CRW, Capital Region Water. And we need to, all the documentation was correct, but there was a bit of a misstatement on the amount in the motion, so we would like to approve that item. So Mrs. Lindsay, would you like to make a motion on that
Yes,
for us?
I'd like to make a motion to amend the mutual release and settlement of all claims agreement with CRW in the amount of $1,009,587.
Thank you. And that is the correct amount. Is there a second to Mrs. Lindsay's motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. And anybody have any announcements for the good of the order?
Yes, just a reminder to the residents that Saturday, Parks and Recreation will be holding a yard sale at George Park from 8 to 11, and you can still sign up online.
Very good. Any other announcements?
A question for our director. Do we have any Cops and Coffee planned in the near future?
No, sir. We've been, with COVID going on, we've been kind of stepping away from the direct contact forms of interaction. Hopefully, as more people become vaccinated and some of these restrictions loosen up, I can see those programs coming back, yes.
Thank you.
Well, fortunately, the vaccination program is moving forward. As of today, everybody is eligible for it. So it seems to be moving forward. Hopefully, a loosening of restrictions will be following very shortly. It'll be great to get Cops and Coffee and all of our programs back on for this summer and fall that we missed last year. I think everybody's anxious to get back to normal.
It's everybody 16 and up.
Everybody 16 and up, correct. Mr. Gottschall, anything else from your point of view?
No, sir.
Okay. Our next board meeting will be a business meeting on Tuesday, April 20th, 1 week from tonight at 7 p.m. in this room. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Second. Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Now you can do your picture.
So, we have some flag controversy.